The hero's choice. Does he stay comfortable and safe, or does he embrace his call to duty and greatness? This pivotal moment in the hero's journey shows up again and again in the stories we tell. In this transmission, we'll explore the turning point in 4 unforgettable films: When the Burden is Accepted and The Ascent begins. And we'll ask why this moment echoes across generations and genres, what it reveals about us, and who we long to become. That's today on The Restless Signal. Welcome to The Restless Signal, where we seek truth, wrestle with meaning, and strive to live well. I'm the voice of the signal, and together we're tuning in. I'm really glad you're with us today. This is another signal in the static transmission where I react to something I'm seeing in the news or social media that makes me restless. You all know I like to explore truth and meaning, often through the lens of the stories we tell, because I think our stories are more than just entertainment. They're a kind of cultural mirror, a concise synthesis of who we are, what's important to us, and who we wish we could be. And as I was brainstorming this episode, one particular kind of moment kept coming to mind. It's a moment you see in film and TV again and again. Not the beginning of the hero's journey, and not the triumphant ending, but the middle. In fact, more precisely, the choice, the pivot, where the hero, often reluctantly but faithfully, accepts his role to lead. Not because he wants to, not because he feels ready, but because he knows he must. There's a gravity to that moment, a quiet power, and often becomes one of the most emotionally resonant scenes in the entire story. And it made me think of something that happened to me several years ago, a moment of choosing. I was a first-year manager at a large consulting firm on the biggest project I had ever been part of. Over 150 people, $15 million budget, tight timelines, and real stakes. One day, a very senior executive, someone with real power, sent an email that was more than rude. It was cruel, humiliating to someone on my team who was working under extraordinary pressure to do a good job and certainly didn't deserve a senior executive punching down at them publicly. It wasn't just bad form, it crossed the line. And I sat there, staring at my screen, feeling like someone should do something about it. And then I realized maybe that someone was me. That was my person after all. She was on my team, entrusted to my care. I couldn't just let her be demeaned without saying something in protest, could I? But I was a nobody, a first-level manager with no influence, no cachet, no power. And in consulting, tolerating a certain level of abuse from the client is just part of the job, isn't it? And ticking off a bigwig is a sure ticket to getting kicked off the project. And who knows what happens to you, your job, and your career after a fall like that. So I was at a crossroads. Was I willing to pay the price to do the right thing? Could I live with myself if I didn't? We'll return to that moment later. As I reflect on these pivotal moments, both the real and fictional, I realize that they aren't so different. Sure, the real ones are often smaller in scale, but the pattern was the same. A burden, a choice, a cost. These aren't just movie moments, they're human moments. And maybe that's why they show up everywhere. From Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, to Balin from Kingdoms of Heaven, from Simba from The Lion King, to Robert the Bruce from Braveheart. We keep telling the same story. A reluctant figure called to lead, a moment of hesitation, and then an ascent. But why do we keep returning to that? Why does that moment, that specific kind of moment, resonate so deeply across centuries and cultures? What does it say about us? What does it say about who we are and who we are meant to be? That's what I want to explore today. Not the full arc of the hero's journey, but the turning point, the sacred moment where purpose is embraced and destiny begins. This is the hero's ascent, and maybe yours too. In the mid-20th century, mythologist Joseph Campbell introduced the concept of the hero's journey, a narrative pattern that appears across time, cultures, and civilizations. You've seen it, even if you didn't know its name. A seemingly ordinary person is called to something greater. They resist at first. Then, through hardship and sacrifice, they are transformed and return with new strength, wisdom, or power to offer the world. It's everywhere, from Moses to Moana, to Frodo to Luke Skywalker. But within that familiar arc, there's often one particular moment, a pivot, that reoccurs with surprising emotional force. Not every hero journey includes it, but when it shows up, it lands hard. It's not the initial call to adventure, and it's not the final act of triumph or sacrifice. It's the moment when the hero finally says yes, when the burden isn't just placed upon them, but accepted, when they stop running, when they take up the weight of who they are and what they must do. It's often quiet and understated, but somehow it hits like a drum in the chest. These are scenes we don't often forget. Let's look at 4 of them. Not for their battles, not for their endings, just for that moment. Our hero accepts who they are called to be. Let's start with Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Aragorn is the heir to kings long dead, a descendant of Isildur, the man who failed to destroy evil when he had the chance. And Aragorn knows it. He feels it in his blood. That doubt, that legacy. So he hides in plain sight. He's noble, brave, honorable, but not ruling. He calls himself a ranger. He fights, he leads, but he doesn't step forward. Because deep down, he's afraid that to take the crown is to follow in the failure of his line. He's not reluctant out of laziness. He's reluctant out of shame. But the world is breaking. War is all around. In the moment of greatest need, something shifts. Elrond comes to him, carrying the reforged sword of his ancestors, a sword that was broken, but now was whole. And he offers it, not as a prize, but as a question and a challenge. Become who you are born to be.
Andúril, a flame of the west, forged from the shards of Narsil. Sauron will not have forgotten the sword of Elendil. The blade that was broken shall return to Minas Tirith. The man who can wield the power of this sword can summon to him an army more deadly than any that walks this earth. Put aside the ranger. Become who you are born to be.
This is not a victory. It's not even a decision to fight. He had been doing that for 2 films already. This is the moment Aragorn accepts the weight he was born to carry. He doesn't roar. He doesn't boast. He simply takes the sword. And in that instant, the man who had fought in the shadows becomes the king the world needs. The emotion we feel is not the thrill of battle. It's the quiet relief of a calling finally answered. Because what moves us is not his greatness, it's his resolve. And because we recognize ourselves in that fear, in that hesitation, in that ache to step forward, but the doubt that whispers, what if I fail? What if I'm not enough? And when he grips the sword, when the score rises, we don't cheer for a warrior. We exhale with a man who has finally stopped running, and we want to do the same. Let's turn to Balin from Kingdom of Heaven. Balin is no heir, no prince, no prophet. He's a blacksmith from France, a grieving man who has lost his wife and his peace. He's come to Jerusalem during the Crusades, hoping to find redemption for a life that feels broken. But instead of peace, he finds chaos, political intrigue, religious violence, a city on the edge of war. and slowly, almost reluctantly, he is pulled into its defense. Near the climax of the movie, the city is surrounded by Saladin's army. The king is dead. The army has been mostly defeated. Most of what remains are common men, merchants, carpenters, peasants, terrified and practically leaderless. The patriarch of Jerusalem asks Balin, what will they do? They have no knights to defend the city.
Every man at arms, or capable of bearing them, kneel! On your knees! Be without fear in the face of your enemies. Be brave and upright that God may love thee. Speak the truth, even if it leads to your death. Safeguard the helpless. That is your oath. And that is so you remember it. Rise a knight! Rise a knight!
Rise a knight. He gives them a mission, and in doing so, he gives them a reason to stand. This is not pageantry, it's sacrament. These are not lords, they are cooks and merchants and farmers. But he raises them, and in doing so, he becomes something he had not been before. A leader of men, a steward of courage. He doesn't just fight with them, he calls them into honor. And the city does not fall that day because of weapons. It stands because of a moment of transformation, when one man raised others into purpose and became a commander, not by force, but by grace. This is an ascent, not through victory, not through destiny, but through service. And we feel it because it's something our world is starving for. Leadership that is earned in the dust, authority that flows from sacrifice, honor that is freely given away to those who didn't believe it could be theirs. Balin is not crowned, but he's a king in the truest way, and we see it, and we long to be like him, not for glory, but to be someone who can lift others like that. Let's turn to Simba from The Lion King. Simba is born into greatness, but spends most of his story running from it. After tragedy strikes, he flees, not just from the kingdom, but from himself. He hides in a land of ease, pretending that the past doesn't matter, that responsibilities are optional, that someone else will step in and fix the world he left behind. He's not a coward, he's ashamed, and so he chooses numbness over purpose, distraction over destiny. But the land he left is dying. His people are suffering. And finally, after a confrontation with his past and a vision of his father, the truth breaks through. He remembers who he is. He returns. He faces the villain, Scar. The battle is fought. But the moment that moves us, the moment that defines the story, isn't the fight. It's what happens afterwards. Scar is gone. The tyranny is broken. The sky is split with thunder. In the silence that follows, Simba climbs. He climbs Pride Rock, slowly, painfully, alone. There is almost no dialogue, just rain and a score in his slow, deliberate ascent. It's not just triumphant, it's restorative. It's the moment the prodigal son becomes a king, and the land answers. Life is restored, the animals bow, because Simba has finally risen. He's not claiming a throne, he's reclaiming himself. And the power of that moment doesn't come from animation or nostalgia. It comes from what it represents. The person who has hidden long enough, the one who carries regret, fear, guilt, finally standing up, lifting his head, and stepping into what he was meant for. It's not about ruling, it's about becoming. Finally, let's talk about Robert the Bruce from Braveheart. Sometimes the ascent doesn't happen when the hero is young or strong. Sometimes it comes after failure. That's why Robert the Bruce's moment is so vital. For much of Braveheart, Bruce is paralyzed by fear and calculation. He admires William Wallace, the hero of the film, wants to believe in him, even follows him at times. But when it matters most, Robert the Bruce listens to his conniving father and betrays William Wallace. Wallace is captured, executed, and the cause of a free Scotland seems lost. And that's when Robert the Bruce rises. He doesn't rise as a flawless leader. He rises as a broken man, ashamed but ready. In the final scene, Scottish troops are gathered again on the battlefield. The nobles are preparing to negotiate, lay down arms, accept more humiliation, but Robert the Bruce's claim to the throne will be recognized by England. But Bruce interrupts. He rides out in front of them and speaks plainly.
You have bled with Wallace! Now bleed with me!
You bled with Wallace, now bleed with me. It's not a rallying cry, nor a roar. It's an invitation and a repentance. This is a man who couldn't lead when it counted, asking for the chance to lead now. He's not bold. He's not polished. Something about that quiet plea, humble and heartfelt, breaks through. The men respond. The charge begins, and the revolution is reborn. We are moved by this not because of the battlefield glory, but because we see a man redeem his failure through courage. Because sometimes the ascent doesn't happen before the fall. Sometimes it happens because of the fall. Sometimes your moment doesn't come until after you've let people down. But if you rise anyway, the world might still follow. The pattern is clear. These four men are so different. A reluctant king who doubts his lineage, a grieving blacksmith who lifts others, a lion haunted by shame, a noble who failed and finds the courage to return. And yet all four moments feel the same when we watch them. Why? Because each one marks a moment of ascent, not ascent into comfort, nor fame or indulgence, but ascent into purpose, into identity. It's a mantle freely taken, sometimes trembling, but never coerced. These are not coronations. They're conversions. Not one of these heroes steps forward because he feels fully ready. They rise because the moment calls and they answer. And that answer changes them. What moves us is not the spectacle, not the pageantry, not even the victory that comes later. What moves us is the yes. Yes to the weight. Yes to the risk. Yes to the responsibility no one else may even see, but which they alone are meant to carry. Once you recognize this moment, you begin to see it everywhere. It's not just fantasy. It's not just film. It's in Scripture. Moses hiding in the wilderness, protesting that he isn't eloquent enough, yet stepping forward anyway when God sends him to Pharaoh. It's David, the youngest son, overlooked by everyone, but anointed with oil to become king. Peter, broken by his own denial, called back by Christ, not to be punished, but to be entrusted. Feed my sheep. Even Mary, a teenage girl from a dusty village, who hears the call and answers with the most powerful human words ever spoke, "Let it be done to me according to your word." They weren't necessarily ready, and yet they rose. And it still happens today. You've seen it. The father who steps in, though he's absent before. The woman who turns pain into protection for others. The teacher who becomes a defender. The worker who becomes a witness, a whistleblower. The ordinary person who becomes a protector, a creator, a voice. Not because they were chosen by the world, but because they answered the moment and were transformed by it. In the next section, we'll talk about why this moment resonates so deeply, why it stirs something ancient and aching inside us, and why so few people today feel like they ever get the chance to rise. But before we do this, let this settle. The moment you long for is not fiction. It's not nostalgia. It's not unreachable. It's real. It's not reserved for kings or soldiers or chosen ones in stories. The moment to rise comes for everyone, even you, perhaps especially you. Let's talk about why the hero's ascent resonates so deeply. Let's be honest. The reasons these moments move us so deeply, the ones we just walked through, is not because we're huge fans of swords or speeches. It's because something in them feels familiar, personal, even painful. Because we've stood at the edge of something hard, something meaningful, and wondered, is this mine to do? Am I supposed to step forward? Will I fail? Will anyone follow? Am I even worthy of this? And sometimes we didn't say yes to the call. We stayed quiet. We played it safe. We turned away, which means the ache we feel when the hero steps forward, it's not just inspiration. It's a memory of who we might have been. It's the echo of a road not taken. But it's even something more powerful. It's hope. Hope that maybe we haven't missed our moment. Hope that there's still time to rise. We are made to pour ourselves out. It's written into us. Even if you don't believe in a creator, you can still see it in how we respond to beauty, sacrifice, honor, loyalty, truth. We ache to give our lives to something larger than comfort. We weren't made to binge our way through existence. That's why something in us goes numb the longer we stay passive. We were built to stand, to build, to guard, to speak, to endure, to rise. The moment of ascent resonates because it aligns with the shape of our soul. And when we ignore it, when we push it down, we become smaller. Not less valuable, not less loved, but smaller. Like a sword rusting in its scabbard. Like a fire that never catches. This is why those fictional moments don't feel foreign. They feel familiar. Not because we've lived them, but because deep down, we were meant to. We in America live in the most materially comfortable society in human history. Most of us have access to food, shelter, entertainment, and education at levels unimaginable just 100 years ago. We have more safety, more rights, more personal choice. And yet, we're more anxious, more depressed, and more aimless than ever before. Here's just a glimpse. Friendlessness. 15% of men report having no close friends. Loneliness. 1 in 3 adults report chronic loneliness. Antidepressants. 1 in 4 women aged 40 to 59 are on them. Alcoholism. Over 140,000 deaths per year in the U.S. alone. Pornography, consumed regularly by many young men, which is deeply tied to isolation, detachment, and shame. Screen time, over 7 hours per day on average, more than 100 full days a year. Work dissatisfaction, only 20% of people feel engaged in their jobs. Religious decline, church attendance, prayer, and belief in God have plummeted over the decades. Suicide, now a leading cause of death for young adults. Rates rose 30% from 2000 to 2020. These aren't small numbers. They're symptoms. We are a culture drowning in noise, but starved for meaning. We're rich in comfort and bankrupt in clarity. We have freedom, but we don't know what it's for. This is the context into which these heroic ascent moments drop like thunder. They're shaking something loose. They stir what's still alive inside of us. Instead of meaning, we are sold distractions. Instead of virtue, we are sold pleasures. Instead of responsibility, we are sold identity. Something pre-built, pre-packaged, and often unearned. We avoid the hard road. We delay the decision. We wait for a sign and we numb the ache. But none of it satisfies, because we were not made to watch. We were made to do. That's why the Ascent hits so hard, because they are everything we're told to avoid: risk, duty, responsibility, self-sacrifice, and legacy. And yet, those are the only path to a full life. Here's a hard truth. No one is going to hand you your moment. In fact, the world is very comfortable with you never rising. You'll never be told to pour yourself out. You'll never be told to pick up a burden. You'll never be told to be brave and upright so that God might love you. Instead, you'll be told, take it easy. You do you. Stay in your lane. Don't offend. Don't get involved. Don't sacrifice. Don't climb that hill. Why bother? What difference would it make? That's not wisdom. That's retreat. And it kills the call inside of you. And almost every time you ignore it, the call grows fainter until you almost forget you ever heard it. Almost. But some part of you remembers. That's why you still tear up when Aragorn walks through the Haunted Mountain. That's why you sit up straighter when Balin knights the peasants and tells them to rise. That's why your chest tightens when Robert the Bruce says, you've bled with Wallace, now bleed with me. And yes, that's why the heart beats faster when Simba climbs Pride Rock as the rain falls and the score swells. You're being reminded, this is who you are. This is what you are made for. Not to be the hero of a movie, but to be the hero of your actual life. To take the place that is waiting just for you. Not because you earned it, or built it, or were born into it. Because the moment came and you said yes. Don't mistake this as a call for self-glorification. The true hero's ascent is never about ego. It's about laying your ego down. That's what makes it so noble, so hard, and so worth doing. It's about the father who keeps showing up, exhausted, because his kids need his strength. It's about the teacher who speaks truth, even when it could cost her the job. It's the man who fights to overcome addiction because his family deserves the best of him, not the leftovers. It's the person who sees a need, feels the fear, and steps forward anyway. This is the deep truth behind the Ascent. It's not about being great. It's about being faithful. That's what resonates. That's what we're starved for. And that's what these stories offer us. Not an escape, but a calling. So what do we do with this? You weren't wrong to feel it, the ache, the hunger, the longing for a life that means something. You weren't naive or childish or overly idealistic. You were hearing the sound of something sacred inside of you, the call to rise, to pour yourself out, to say yes to the weight because you were made to carry it. That doesn't mean you'll get a throne. It doesn't mean there'll be a music swelling in the background. It doesn't mean anyone will see or applaud it when you take your stand. But it does mean this. Your life is not an accident. Your ache is not a glitch. Your longing for greatness, of soul, not ego, is a signal that the stories that move you are not distractions. They're reminders. You were meant to rise. In this section, we'll talk about how. First, you need to recognize the ache, because it all starts with the ache, that restless feeling, the quiet tension, that sense that something is waiting for you, but you don't know what. You're not alone in that. Think of Simba, haunted by shame and confusion, unsure whether his life still had any meaning. It wasn't the roar that made him a king. It was the decision to stop hiding. The ache you feel, that's the same ache. It's not a glitch in your system. It's a feature of your soul. It's a signal that you were made for something more than consumption, more than ease, more than comfort. You were made to rise. But it starts by acknowledging the ache and refusing to numb it. Next is discover the spark. Once you feel the ache, then what? You don't need a scroll from on high. Most callings come not with a thunder, but with whispers. Ask yourself, what injustice breaks your heart? Like Aragorn, unable to walk away from the world's need, even when he doubts his right to lead. What truth won't let you rest? Like Balian, he couldn't ignore the suffering around him and took responsibility others had abandoned. What past failures haunt you? Like Robert the Bruce, who betrayed walls and then had to choose, stay ashamed or rise anyway. What hidden strengths have you pushed away? Like Simba, believing too long the lie that he had no future. Your answers don't need to be grand. They just need to be honest. Somewhere inside you, there's already a spark. Fan it. Feed it. Even if it's small. Even if it's quiet. Even if you don't know where it's going yet. The spark is not the end. It's the beginning. Third, start pouring yourself out. Too many people wait for the title. But Balian wasn't born a knight. He became one. And then he made others into knights. Ordinary men. Unlikely defenders. He poured himself out into them so they could rise too. The world doesn't always recognize your efforts, but that's not why you start. You start because the moment needs you, whether it's grand or hidden. Be faithful in your job, even when no one sees it. Build something good, even if it's small. Defend the truth, even when it costs you. Love your family well, even if you're exhausted. That's what Robert the Bruce finally did. He didn't come back to applause. He came back with blood on his hands and a vow to be better. That's where most of us start too. Not with clean hands, but with a decision. I will not stay down. I will not stay hidden. You build your ascent through action. Fourth, be ready for the moment and learn to recognize it. The moment will come. But it won't come with the spotlight. No swelling orchestra, no camera zoom, no wizard in the corner telling you it's time. It may not feel like a storybook moment at all. It may feel like inconvenience, or tension, or quiet dread. But it's there. Think of Aragorn, the ranger, the reluctant heir, the man who had spent years avoiding his destiny. When Elrond brings him the reforged sword, he could have refused again. He could have said, I'm not ready. But he doesn't. He reaches out, takes the blade, and in that act accepts the burden of kingship. No crown, no crowd, just a decision. That's what your moment may look like too. So how to recognize your moment? How will you know it's your time? You probably won't, not at first. But here's what to look for. Responsibility no one else is claiming. You see what others ignore, and you feel it. The pressure, the weight. That's not random. That's the call. A quiet conviction that won't go away. It nags you. It wakes you up. It won't let you move on. That's not your imagination. That's the summons. A need that lines up with your strength. Maybe you're the only one who can speak clearly here, or defend someone, or fix what's breaking. That convergence, it's not a coincidence. Fourth, fear, doubt, a voice saying, you, really? That's almost always part of it. The voice showed up for Moses, for Peter, Balian, Aragorn, probably you. Don't listen. The moment won't come announced, but it will come with a choice. Will you stay hidden, or will you rise? Most people miss it because they're waiting for the music. But real moments of ascent are quiet. A friend in crisis, a child in need, a truth worth defending, a cause worth lifting and pouring yourself into, a task everyone else shrugs off, but you feel it was meant for you. You don't need certainty, you just need readiness. Say yes in advance, so when the sword is offered, you're already reaching for it. And fifth, give thanks. Before you brace for the wait, pause. Because what you're being offered isn't just responsibility, it's a gift. The chance to live a life that matters. To pour yourself out for something true isn't a burden to resent, it's a privilege to receive. Not everyone gets that opportunity. Many drift, many numb the ache. but you're being called. And that call itself is evidence that your life is meant for more. You don't earn it. You're entrusted with it. And it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. You were made for meaning. And that call to rise is not just a duty, it's a blessing. So, we've seen how this moment, this pivot in the hero's journey, keeps showing up. The moment where the hero doesn't just receive a crown or a cause, but chooses it freely, fully, sometimes fearfully. And we see it again and again because it speaks to something deep within us. Indeed, it's something we deeply, badly need in this broken culture that is full of comfort, overflowing with cheap pleasure, but bereft of real substance. The sad statistics and the news stories we see every day of aimlessness, loneliness, and suicide speak of people who ache for it. Not heroic admiration, but heroic aspiration. Because we need what it represents: meaning, purpose, a mission worth carrying. Most of us won't draw a sword from a stone. We won't lead armies or ride into battle beneath a banner. But we don't need that. Because the power of these moments isn't in the setting, it's in the invitation. An invitation to carry a burden, to do good, to take up a role that may never be recognized or applauded, but will make us more than what we were. It won't come with a trumpet or a title, but when it comes, it will be real. And in saying yes, quietly, firmly, perhaps even fearfully, we grow. That's the ascent. And it can happen anywhere. At a desk, in a kitchen, in a factory, in a moment that looks like nothing to the world, but changes everything for you. You don't need a sword. You need the courage to say yes to the call and the strength to carry it forward. Earlier, I told you a moment I had, sitting at my desk, staring at a screen, debating whether to confront a senior client who had crossed the line. I wasn't brave in the cinematic sense. I wasn't holding a sword or standing before a crowd. But I was holding a choice. A choice that had real consequences for me. Do I confront this person, or do I let it slide? Maybe I could just comfort my teammate later, tell her she did nothing wrong, but not stand for her now. Well, you know how this ends. I wouldn't be telling you this story if I had run away. No, I stood up and spoke out. I replied, professionally but firmly, that he wasn't to speak to my team that way. And you know what happened? I didn't lose my job. I didn't get kicked off the project. No one reprimanded me for my tone. In fact, several people thanked me for doing it. Turns out that this man was a known bully. And that woman I stood beside, she's still with me today. Not only did she come with me to the next project, she followed me to another company to stay on my team. She's become one of my closest professional colleagues and trusted advisors. And we forged a bond through shared sacrifice and mutual respect. The kind of trust that only comes from standing together when it costs something. I know this story might seem small. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a police officer. I've never faced real danger, and I consider that a blessing. But maybe that's exactly why this story matters. Because most of us, thankfully, won't find ourselves in life or death moments. But we will be given choices, small ones, quiet ones. But they still matter. That moment mattered to her, and it mattered to me, because it helped form me into the man I am and the one I'm still trying to become. I'm a flawed man. I struggle, like we all do. But there's one piece of character I've forged and keep. If someone is treated unjustly on my watch, someone under my care, I will not stay silent. Not because I'm brave, not because I want to fight, but because it's right. Because it's my duty, and it's my privilege. That's what these moments really are, an opportunity. Big or small, loud or hidden, a chance to offer something to the world, to rise even when it's hard, to answer a quiet call of service, to say yes to something even when it costs you, and in doing so, to become more than you were. That's it for today's show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll try to be transmitting again soon. If something about this episode spoke to you, leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, seek truth, wrestle with meaning, live well, and above all, keep the signal clear. You've been listening to the Restless Signal podcast, copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Check us out on the web at therestlesssignal.com.